Here are 10 of the most misunderstood crosspaths in BTD6. We'll start with the hardest one in the game, Stronger Stimulant. For years we've been told if you have 1 or 2 damage dealers, buff them with a 4-2-0, and if you have 3 or more, buff them with a 4-0-1. Well, I want you guys to forget that garbage, throw it away, and follow this. What's fun is it actually starts with the Berserker Brew. If you didn't know, the 3rd tier Alchemist throws a potion every 8 seconds that gives extra damage, pierce, attack speed, and range, and this buff stays on a monkey for 5 seconds or until it's attacked 25 times, whatever comes first. Now, making it a 3-2-0 makes each potion last 6 seconds or 40 attacks, while making it a 3-0-1 lets him throw this potion more often, every 6.4 seconds. And this leads to our easy rule to follow. If you're buffing a slow attacker that doesn't use all 25 attacks in the 5 seconds, buff him with a 3-0-1. A Bloonjitsu Ninja is a great example of this. This will give him nearly 100% uptime on Berserker Brew. If you're buffing a faster attacker though, like a Destroyer or Overdrive, you should make your Alchemist a 3-2-0 to up the number of attacks they get. But that leaves the sneaky third option, not crosspathing the Alchemist at all. This should only be done when buffing weaker monkeys that you don't think you'll get enough extra damage to justify the money spent crosspathing it. This is really only for advanced players that know how to get more out of their money. For blackboarding most maps though, you don't have to worry about it. As for Stronger Stimulant, the tier 4 upgrade, the real decision is whether you leave the Alchemist as a Berserker Brew or spend the money to upgrade it. Buying this upgrade increases the Brew's buff to +3 pierce, +17.6% attack speed, and it can last up to 12 seconds or 40 attacks. Notice that this doesn't increase the damage buff at all, so there are only 3 factors when deciding to buy this upgrade, whether your monkey needs more pierce, attack speed, or better uptime. Now, in a normal game, you can just buy Stronger Stim and move on, as it will make your main damage dealer better. But if you're on a very hard map or going for some crazy challenge and need to save money somewhere, this is actually a pretty good spot to do it. The Stronger Stim upgrade costs more than a 3-0-0 Alchemist, so you'll be doubling your money spent on this monkey, and you might be able to spend this money on a Moab Glue or Embrittlement for better results. For most tier 3s and 4s, you can skip getting Stronger Stim, but this even extends to some tier 5s like the Bloon Solver, Ultra Juggernaut, Perma Charge, Blooncineration, biggest one, Inferno Ring, Super Glue, Grandmaster Ninja, Adora, and Churchill. If you do move forward with Stronger Stim, a good rule of thumb is to make it a 4-2-0 right next to your main damage dealer, as it prioritizes the closest monkey to it. Technically, there are certain monkeys and combos that a 4-0-1 is better, like a May Moab and Bouncing Bullet, but that just comes down to memorizing every monkey and is way too in-depth for this video. An example of all this coming together though would be getting a Bloon Area Denial system. He attacks less than 5 times per second, so if we leave him as is, we buff him with a 3-0-1 Alchemist, but we plan on making him a Bez later on, which benefits from Stronger Stim, so for now we'll make the Alchemist a 3-2-0. It's slightly worse, but the late game is worth it. This tier 4 doesn't need a Stronger Stim, so instead we'll spend the $3,000 on 2 acidic mixture dips, letting the bads have AMD on him 100% of the time. This makes him way better than if we'd spent that money on a Stronger Stim. Then, much later in the game, when we upgrade the Dartling to a Bez, we'll make the Alchemist a 4-2-0, which lets him have a surprisingly high uptime on the buff. So, if you plan on making your Alchemist a Stronger Stim, make it a 4-2-0 and put it right next to your main damage dealer. If this is just a mid-game tower or one of the tier 5s listed earlier, you can save money and leave your Alchemist as a Berserker Brew. Make it a 3-2-0 for fast attackers and a 3-0-1 for slow ones. Moving on, we have the Archmage. If Crosspath does a 5-2-0, he gets 2 extra attacks, Fireballs and Walls of Fire. He shoots 3 fireballs at a time that each deal 9 damage, 27 extra damage to blimps, and have 15 pierce, while his Walls of Fire get placed twice as fast as normal and deal +4 damage to Moab class balloons. As for the 5-0-2, this Crosspath gives the Archmage 5 extra pierce to each bolt, 2 extra pierce to each flame, extra attack range, and camo detection. Overall, very solid for such a cheap crosspath. And for years, this has been the preferred route. Even now, the 5-0-2 is better against ceramics, but that's not what the Archmage is made for. Recent buffs have given the 5-2-0 enough power to finally be the better option. That extra Moab damage goes a long way in the late game. Next, we have the Carrier Flagship. Building it as a 5-2-0 adds flaming grape shots to the main ship and planes. For the ship, this adds 6 projectiles to each attack, while on the planes, it replaces the 8 radial darts that fire in all directions, with 6 grapes that are aimed forward. These grapes also apply a burn effect that deals 2 instances of 9 damage. As for the 5-0-2, the buck gets camo detection, extra range, and most importantly, 2 extra pierce to both the main ship and plane. Now, what makes this tower fun is that destroyers are much better with grape shot, as those extra projectiles make him a menace in the mid game, However, the carrier Flagship is better as a 502, as that extra pierce helps a ton with the insanely dense rounds of the 90s. Similar to this, we have the Perma Charge. Making him a 250 increases his pierce from 4 to 13, while the 052 gets more range and extra damage across the board. We're talking 4 extra base damage, 4 more damage to blimps, and his ability gives plus 10 damage instead of plus 8. How this is almost identical to the carrier Flagship is that the Perma Charge is better as a 250, as that pierce goes a long way in the late game. But its earlier tiers are better with the bottom crosspath, as extra damage helps out a ton earlier on. So if you're stopping at a bionic boomer, making it a 032. If you're going all the way to a Perma Charge, make it a 250 and give it a MIB so it can damage DDTs. Shifting gears, let's look at the Blooncineration, the tier 5 mortar monkey. For years, the 025 has been the preferred choice because it almost doubles its attack speed, making it fire every 1.08 seconds instead of every 2. However, recent buffs have swung the pendulum to favor the 205. Crosspathing this way makes the Blooncin's explosions larger, and they can hit 45 balloons instead of 25. Its burn effect goes from dealing 5 damage to balloons and 100 to blimps to 8 damage to balloons and 150 to blimps, and the walls of fire are 40% larger. Their pierce goes from 20 to 36, and they deal 3 damage every 0.1 seconds instead of 1. This extra pierce and damage now outweigh the attack speed route, so make sure to crosspath your Blooncins with Bloon Buster. Following this, we have the Super Maelstrom. Making it a 250 increases its attack speed by 77% and the ability fire rate by 38.4%, so it shoots its blades much more often. Compare this to the 052 that makes it shoot 12 blades per attack instead of 8, increases its ability duration by 3 seconds, and the ability now spins counterclockwise. That last part isn't important, just cool. But luckily for us, the choice is pretty simple. The 250 is usually better because its ability has a lot higher DPS, to the point where it can take out ZOMGs, plus its main attack is better this way. The only downside is that its ability has a lot less uptime, so be careful. Moving on, we have the Moab Press, a monkey that pushes back blimps with its special boomerangs. This incredibly useful tower is actually crosspathed incorrectly by many players. Making this guy a 204 increases the heavy Kylie's pierce from 200 up to 420 and knocks back Moab class balloons 50% farther, while making him a 024 increases his attack speed by about 43%, letting him throw his heavy Kylie every 5.625 seconds instead of every 10. Now, these are close enough that the scenario determines what crosspath you should go. If you're on a single lane map and you can place the boomer on a straightaway that uses all of its pierce, make him a 204. Having a couple of these will help a ton on dense rounds like 96 and 98. However, if you're on a map that has multiple active tracks or you're on a curve, you'll want to make them 024s. This is because it'll be hard to use all their pierce here, and it's easier for them to keep up with several tracks with that extra attack speed. Next, we have the Glue Storm. This guy's ability is amazing as it glues the entire screen, making affected balloons take +2 damage from every attack and makes leads vulnerable to any damage type. For the longest time, the better crosspath was the 250, as this let the glue stick to Moab class balloons, but now any Glue Storm can do this. In fact, the 250 just adds a low damage over time effect and lets the glue soak through every layer of a balloon. And the 052 makes the glue last over twice as long and slows balloons by 75% instead of 50. So the better option is the 052. For our second to last tower, we have the Perma Spike. Making this factory a 205 increases his pierce from 50 to 85 and changes his damage type from sharp to normal, letting him pop every type of balloon. Compare this to the 025 that increases his attack speed by 67%. This makes the top end power of the two crosspaths pretty even. With a stronger stim, the 025 has slightly more popping power as it synergizes better with an Alchemist. However, the preferred route is actually the 105. This is because crosspathing with bigger stacks is much better for the earlier upgrades whether you have an Alchemist or not. It's $650 cheaper, which is a big deal in the early game, and you don't need to buy white hot spikes because an Alchemist can keep AMD on this factory 100% of the time, and you should always be buffing your Perma Spikes with stronger stims. And finally, we have the Bez. This monster of a balloon popper is a bit deceiving with its crosspath. Building him as a 205 makes his buckshot much more accurate, travel 40% farther, and adds a laser shock effect to its shot. This makes affected balloons take 6 shock damage, but much more importantly, makes the Bez deal 6 extra damage to balloons that are already being shocked. Compare this to the 025 that gives it camo detection and makes it attack 50% faster. Normally, attack speed is the way to go as it directly increases the tower's DPS, but in this case, the 205 is better. The increased accuracy and laser shock damage outweigh the attack speed of the middle crosspath. But those were 10 of the most misunderstood crosspaths in BTD6. If you have any that you think I should have covered, let me know down in the comments.